Stop. Every financial strategy you have ever tried has collapsed at the exact same point. Not at the beginning, not in the middle, but at the moment of consolidation. The Arcturian Council has already identified why. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly why your financial flow has been blocked, what hidden pattern has been draining your abundance, and what the Arcturian Council already knows about this phase. But here is the first revelation. The reason your money never stays is not because you are doing something wrong now. It is because you already agreed, in a previous lifetime, to do without it permanently. That agreement is still active, it is still governing your field, and it is the reason every modern effort reaches a ceiling and then collapses without explanation. This is not a metaphor. The Arcturian Council does not speak in metaphors when the pattern is this precise. What they have located in your field is a vow, not a belief, not a wound, a sworn contract entered in a lifetime where accumulating wealth carried the threat of persecution, death, or betrayal. At a specific moment of pressure, you chose survival over prosperity, and you formalized that choice at a level that crossed the death threshold with you intact. You are carrying it now. You brought it into this body, into this life, into every financial decision you have made since birth. The field has been obeying it faithfully. What you experience as chronic financial instability, as money that arrives and immediately disperses, as progress that resets without reason, that is not failure. That is a binding clause executing exactly as it was written. Tonight, the Arcturian Council has located your signature on that contract. The revocation right has already been opened. What remains is your participation in the severance, a counter-signature spoken aloud before sleep, which is all that is required to complete it. The field has already been prepared. The timing of this transmission is not coincidental. The algorithm only delivered this. It did not create the moment. Like this transmission, if you know your struggle with money is deeper than bad luck. Comment 111 if you know this message reached you at the exact right time. Comment 777 if you feel an old scarcity pattern is already being exposed. Comment, I break the pattern, if you are ready to end the inherited cycle. And share this transmission with someone who works hard but never seems to keep what they earn. You were guided here because the pattern is already active. What you felt in that moment of recognition, that quiet arrest in your chest when something outside you named something you have been carrying in silence, is not emotional reaction. It is field confirmation. The part of you that already knows the truth does not respond to ideas with ordinary curiosity. It responds to accurate diagnosis with something closer to relief. That is what just happened. The pattern was named, and something in your system recognized the name before your mind fully processed the meaning. That recognition did not travel through logic. It traveled through the field itself, arriving ahead of comprehension, settling into the body before the mind had formed a response. That is not inspiration. That is the beginning of pattern visibility. And visibility is the first thing the scarcity contract has always prevented. You cannot revoke what you cannot see. You cannot break a vow you have spent years interpreting as personal failure. That is the first mechanism the Arcturian Council identifies in every financial field running a hidden poverty instruction. Not that the person lacks ambition, discipline, or intelligence, but that the contract has kept itself invisible by disguising its effects as ordinary inadequacy. Every time money left without explanation, you blamed a decision. Every time a financial opportunity collapsed at the threshold, you blamed your timing. Every time you made progress, only to find yourself back at the beginning, you blamed your character. The vow was never the suspect. It positioned itself behind every mirror you looked into and made sure what you saw was you. This is the contract's primary survival mechanism. Not force, not obstruction, misattribution. It redirects your scrutiny inward and keeps itself outside the frame of examination. You spend years interrogating your habits, your mindset, your worthiness, and the contract remains untouched because it has never been named as a participant. It has been the invisible author of a story you believed you were writing yourself. That is not an accident of suffering. That is a design feature of binding. The way a scarcity contract survives across lifetimes is not through brute force. It survives through interpretation. It shapes the way you read your own financial experience so that every symptom of the contract gets filed under personal failure rather than under pattern recognition. You work harder, you make new plans, you study wealth principles, change your habits, adopt new frameworks, you restructure your spending, reframe your beliefs, surround yourself with new information about abundance. And the results still do not hold. Not because the effort is wrong, but because you are applying present life corrections to a field that is still obeying a past life command. The new knowledge lands on the surface. The old instruction governs the structure. It is like repainting the exterior of a house while the foundation is actively cracking. The surface changes, the structure does not. Every tool you have tried was real. Every intention was genuine. What was missing was not effort or belief. What was missing was the recognition that you were working on the visible layer of a problem that lives below visibility, that the financial results you kept experiencing were not produced by your current choices, but by a field instruction that predates this body, this life, and every financial decision you have made within it. The Arcturian Council does not measure your financial life by its surface. They read the field beneath the decisions, the underlying instruction governing what is allowed to consolidate, what is permitted to remain, what is required to disperse. And what they have found in the fields of people carrying an active poverty vow is this: the contract does not prevent money from arriving. It prevents money from belonging. There is a precise distinction between those two experiences, and most people in this pattern have spent years misidentifying which one they are living. Money arrives. You can earn it, attract it, receive it. The field allows inflow. What the field does not allow is settlement. The moment abundance begins to stabilize, to compound, to establish the conditions for genuine material security, something in the underlying instruction activates. It can look like an unexpected expense, a sudden emergency, a financial opportunity that seemed certain suddenly collapsing, a health crisis, a relationship rupture, a business failure, all arriving precisely when consolidation was beginning. You interpret each event individually as bad luck, poor timing, or personal error. The High Council reads each event as a single pattern, executing its clause. You have been receiving, you have not been retaining, and the difference between those two states is not a difference in effort, strategy, or worthiness. It is a difference in what the field has been authorized to allow. Inflow is permitted, accumulation is blocked. The current enters the vessel, and the vessel empties before fullness can register, before the weight of genuine stability can be felt, before you can stand on solid financial ground long enough to know what that ground feels like. The vessel receives. The vessel cannot retain. The water is not the problem. The vessel was written to leak before fullness could be established. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary frustration. It is the moment your system stops pretending this pattern is just bad luck. If this transmission put language around a financial struggle you have been carrying in silence, Arcturian Wealth Scan, the Gold Frequency Audit, was created for this exact stage. It is not another promise of abundance. It is a direct audit of the hidden pattern affecting your material field, so you can begin to see whether the drain is rooted in inherited scarcity, guilt around wealth, energetic rejection, or an older financial instruction still shaping your results. The link is in the first pinned comment, but it will not remain there forever. Now understand the second layer of this pattern, because recognition of the first is not sufficient if the second remains invisible. There is a specific emotional texture that accompanies financial field distortion, and it is not the texture most people expect. Most people assume that someone running a scarcity contract would feel deprived, hungry, desperate for wealth. Sometimes that is true, But the more consistent emotional signature, the one the High Council identifies across almost every active poverty vow, is guilt. Not guilt that announces itself clearly, not guilt with a name and a source and an obvious logic, guilt that operates beneath the threshold of awareness, surfacing only at the precise moments when financial increase begins to feel real. Guilt that presents as vague discomfort, as hesitation without reason, as a pulling back from something that should feel like forward movement. You may have noticed it, the strange unease that arrives when an opportunity seems genuinely promising, the internal tightening when money begins to accumulate past a certain threshold, when the number in your account grows past what feels familiar, when an income stream begins to look sustainable, when stability starts to feel like something more than temporary. The way you can speak about wealth conceptually, with full ease, discuss it, consume it as content, affirm it as possibility, but the moment it actually starts arriving in your material life, something in you begins to contract, to pull, to resist in ways you cannot directly articulate. You may call it fear of failure, you may call it fear of losing what you gain, but the High Council identifies it as guilt programming, a deeply embedded instruction that links the act of having more with the anticipation of punishment, loss, or betrayal. This guilt was not invented in your current life. It carries no address in your present biography. It was formed at the moment the original vow was made, in the lifetime where prosperity carried mortal risk, where visibility through wealth attracted the exact forces that threatened survival. At that moment, the choice to survive was coded as a choice to release wealth, not reluctantly, but as a willing sacrifice made under extreme pressure. The surrender was not passive, it was active. It felt necessary, and something in the energetic record of that moment encoded an equation that has been running without interruption ever since. Safety and abundance cannot coexist. Keeping wealth means risking what matters most. The way to protect what you love is to remain without. That equation crossed with you. It traveled through the dissolution of that life and reconstituted itself in this one. It is still running beneath the surface of every financial decision you make, and its most visible symptom in your current material life is not the arrival of poverty. It is the rejection of abundance at the precise threshold where it would have changed everything. The quiet internal refusal that activates exactly when the transformation becomes real enough to feel. Understand this carefully, because it is one of the most misread patterns in an active scarcity field. The rejection is not always dramatic. It does not always look like self-destruction. It rarely arrives as a visible collapse. Most of the time, it looks like subtle incompletion, the business that gets close to profitability and then stalls without clear cause, the savings that reach a significant number and then face an unexpected demand that returns the balance to something more familiar, the raise that arrives and immediately gets absorbed by new expenses that appear from nowhere, the relationship with a financially stable person that dissolves under pressure that seems disproportionate to its cause, the investment that seemed logical, the partnership that seemed sound, the opportunity that seemed confirmed, each one failing at the same structural point, the point of consolidation. Each of these looks like an isolated event. Together, they form the signature of a system that is completing a loyalty obligation to an old instruction: do not exceed the threshold. Do not allow stability to become security. Do not let abundance become identity. The loyalty is not to scarcity as an idea. The loyalty is to a survival mechanism that once kept you alive by making prosperity dangerous. The field is still honoring that mechanism, still executing the same protective function, even though the threat no longer exists, even though the context dissolved lifetimes ago, even though you are standing here in a different body, a different era, with every material reason to move forward. The instruction does not update automatically. It does not self-dissolve when circumstances change. It does not recognize that the persecution has ended, that the danger is gone, that the world you inhabit now has no use for the agreement you made in that other one. It waits for a revocation that was never performed, and until that revocation comes, It continues honoring the original terms with perfect fidelity. This is why effort is insufficient as a correction. This is why every financial self-improvement approach eventually runs into the same ceiling. The ceiling is not located in the strategies. It is not located in your discipline, your knowledge, your willingness to change. It is located in the field beneath the strategies, where the original command is still enforcing its clause every time accumulation approaches the danger threshold. You can update every surface variable and leave the underlying instruction entirely untouched. The results will confirm this. They already have. There is also a third dynamic that the High Council maps in fields carrying active poverty vows, and it is the one most likely to produce the deepest shame because it is the one that looks most like deliberate self-destruction, the one that leaves the clearest evidence and the least coherent explanation. Some people in this pattern do not simply fail to retain wealth. They actively move against it at the critical moment. They spend impulsively when savings begin to grow, moving money out of accumulation and back into circulation before stability can register. They make financial decisions that seem inexplicable in retrospect, choices that felt urgent or necessary in the moment, and look reckless or self-defeating afterward. They create conflict in relationships that were generating stability. They quit, sabotage, or abandon opportunities that were genuinely about to change their material situation, sometimes with full awareness that they are doing it and no capacity to stop. And afterwards, they cannot fully explain the internal logic of what they did. They are left with the evidence of what happened and no coherent account of why, only the familiar weight of having arrived at the same place again through a different route. The shame this produces is significant, because this particular symptom is the hardest to hold with any compassion. Passive financial failure can be explained externally. Active dismantling looks like a choice, and in the absence of a framework that explains what is actually happening, the person experiencing this pattern is left with only one conclusion: that something in them fundamentally refuses to have what they say they want, that they are, at some essential level, self-defeating in a way that no amount of effort will ever fully correct. The High Council does not interpret this as character flaw. They interpret it as an older field instruction overriding present life awareness at the exact moment the system registered danger, because in the original context, that threshold of abundance was the precise threshold where persecution, betrayal, or death became possible. The system learned to act before the danger arrived. It learned to dismantle the conditions of its own risk before the risk could materialize. The protection was not passive, it was preemptive. And now, in a life where the danger is gone, the protective mechanism is still executing on the same trigger. Abundance approaching the old threshold means threat. Dismantle abundance before the threat arrives. Move first. Clear the field before the danger can locate you through it. You did not destroy your own financial stability because you are broken. You dismantled it because a part of you that has not yet received the new information was still keeping you alive by the only method it ever knew. That part does not know the lifetime ended. It does not know the vow was a response to a specific context that no longer exists. It knows only the instruction and the threshold, and it executes with total loyalty every time the threshold is approached. That distinction is not a comfort offered to excuse the pattern. It is the accurate description of the mechanism. And accurate description is the only foundation from which genuine revocation becomes possible. You cannot negotiate with a system you are still misreading as a character defect. The moment you see it clearly, as a protection mechanism still executing past its context, you have moved into a different relationship with it. Not absolution, recognition. And recognition is the entry point for severance. There is a fourth recognition that completes the picture of how this pattern sustains itself across time. And it is the one that explains why financial field distortion so often looks like a family trait rather than a personal condition. Why it runs in households like a shared inheritance. Why children of financially struggling parents so often replicate the same patterns, despite swearing they will not, despite doing everything differently. The poverty vow does not always originate in a single past life. In many cases, it has been reinforced across a lineage, not as identical contracts, but as a coherent field that multiple members of the same family line have organized their material experience around. You may have entered this life already carrying the original contract, but what you encountered in your family of origin was a consistent confirmation of that contract's reality. Generations of financial struggle that normalized financial struggle. Parents who worked without accumulating, who poured energy into labor that never converted to security. Grandparents who lost everything at critical moments of stability, businesses that collapsed, savings that dissolved, land that was sold, opportunities that were foreclosed. A family culture in which sacrifice was not only normalized, but quietly elevated, in which having less was associated with virtue and humility, in which abundance was spoken about with suspicion, with resentment, with the quiet assumption that it belonged to people unlike you. This is not coincidence of circumstance. The Arcturian High Council maps lineages in which a scarcity instruction has been carried through multiple generations, not simply as shared misfortune, but as a coherent field transmission, a pattern that moves through the family system the way a current moves through connected channels, organizing each member's material experience around the same fundamental instruction, even when the individual circumstances appear entirely different. You are born into a family whose energetic field is already organized around the same basic instruction your own past life record is carrying. The contract is now supported by both interior record and exterior environment. It has confirmation on every side. Every financial struggle in your family history becomes evidence that this is simply how things are. Every story of loss, sacrifice, debt, and deferred dreams becomes inherited testimony that abundance is not something people in your line are permitted to hold. You absorbed this as identity before you had the language to question it. Before you were old enough to observe the pattern from outside it, you were already inside it, already being shaped by its gravity, already beginning to interpret your own financial possibilities through the filter of what your family's history had quietly established as the range of what was real. And the tragedy of a lineage-level scarcity pattern is precisely this. It transforms the inherited limitation into a personal characteristic. It becomes something you carry in your sense of who you are, something that makes the idea of genuine financial transformation feel not like freedom, but like rupture, like a betrayal of where you came from, like a step away from the people who shaped you. You may not consciously believe this, but somewhere beneath your modern financial ambitions, there is a thread, quiet, persistent, old, that still wonders whether building real prosperity means leaving your people behind, whether abundance would separate you from the family field that has always defined your understanding of normal, whether succeeding materially in ways your parents and grandparents could not constitutes a kind of disloyalty that love would not permit. That thread is not loyalty. It is the contract using love as its final enforcement mechanism. It is the oldest and most sophisticated clause in the agreement, the one that makes the vow feel like a devotion rather than a limitation, the one that makes release feel like abandonment rather than freedom. And recognizing it is not a rejection of your lineage, it is not a turning away from the people who carried this pattern before you understood it. It is the act that potentially frees everyone in it, the first member of the line who sees the contract clearly enough to name it, and in naming it, begins the revocation that could alter the field for every generation that follows. Near the end of every active scarcity pattern, there is a phase the High Council identifies as the acceleration of symptoms before dissolution. This is the phase where financial pressure becomes most intense, not because the pattern is growing stronger, not because you are failing more completely, but because the field is registering that something is approaching that threatens the contract's continuity. The contract is not passive in this phase. It responds to the proximity of revocation, the way any binding instruction responds to the threat of severance, by increasing its enforcement. More financial stress, more sudden drains that appear without logical source. more intense guilt around any attempt to move towards stability, more vivid confirmation that the old pattern is simply the truth of your situation. The purpose is to collapse the attempt before the revocation can complete, to make the pressure so significant that you conclude the effort is futile before the dissolution can finalize. If this phase sounds familiar, if you are receiving this transmission during a period of unusual financial strain, if the last several months have delivered an accumulation of setbacks that feels disproportionate to any single decision or circumstance, if the pressure has been arriving from multiple directions simultaneously in a way that feels coordinated rather than random, the High Council asks you to hold a different interpretation. What you are experiencing is not escalating failure. It is not confirmation that you are beyond repair. It is the final pressure of a field instruction that can sense its revocation approaching, executing its heaviest enforcement precisely because the threat to its continuity has become real. Patterns do not intensify when they are winning. They intensify when they are being threatened. You are not watching this transmission because the algorithm served you an interesting piece of content at a random moment in a scrolling session. You are watching it because the revocation is already in motion, because something in your field sent you toward the precise recognition you needed at the precise moment the contract became most visible. And the contract becomes most visible at exactly one moment, the moment before its dissolution. That is the moment you are in. The recognition you are experiencing now is not preparation for future work. It is a feature of a process that has already begun. The Arcturian High Council does not see your financial field as fundamentally broken. They do not see you as someone who has failed to understand something obvious or who has been making the same mistake across decades of effort. They see your field as precisely ordered, organized with complete faithfulness around an instruction that was survival logical in its original context, that once represented the most intelligent response available to an impossible situation, and that has been honored ever since with a loyalty that your current life has no adequate language for. The problem is not the precision of the field. The problem is not the loyalty. The problem is that the field is still obeying a command that was never formally revoked, still protecting you from a danger that dissolved lifetimes ago, still treating abundance as the threat it once genuinely was, in a life where that threat no longer has any form. What leaves your life is not gone because it was never meant to stay. It is gone because the field instruction has never been updated to say that staying is now permitted. What feels like constant financial collapse is not personal failure. It is the surface of a field still executing its protective function with total commitment. What feels like punishment is a sealed agreement still in force, still being honored by a part of your energetic record that has never received word that the original context has ended. You are not failing. You are faithfully following an old contract into a life where it no longer serves the one who signed it. Speak this before you sleep tonight. I no longer confuse the pattern with my identity. I release the old scarcity line. What has been draining my abundance is now fully visible, and its hold is ending. You are not saying this as performance. You are not offering it as affirmation or wishful repetition. You are saying it as counter-signature. The field has been prepared. The High Council has located the document. The revocation rite is open. What remains is your spoken participation in its dissolution, the one element that completes the severance, the one thing that was always required and never performed until now. This is not the end of the work, but it is the moment the pattern stops being invisible, and nothing that remains invisible can be revoked. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that this pattern has already touched your financial life. It could be money that never stays, sudden drains, repeated setbacks, guilt when things begin to improve, or the feeling that stability always slips away. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognized something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who works hard but still feels trapped in an invisible cycle of lack. And if you are ready to understand the pattern instead of blaming yourself, subscribe to Arcturian Gold Codex. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a pattern already in motion, and this is only the beginning.